here we are. TCL's rolling out more of its 2025 lineup, and up next is the QM8K. I've been quietly waiting for the QM8K, considering how good the QM851G was from last year. But this year, the QM8K brings some pretty major improvements compared to last year's model. It's available in 4 sizes: 65-inch, 75-inch, 85-inch, and that massive 98 inches. And for those wondering about the 115-inch model from last year, it's still part of TCL's lineup, but it's technically a carryover. TCL has confirmed that while it falls under the QM8 name, it uses different processing and a separate dimming system. So while it's a QM8 in name, it's different enough from your standard QM8 series. One of the first things you'll notice about the QM8K, especially if you've seen last year's model, is the design. If you've been following TCL's design over the past few years, you'll notice they've been gradually shrinking the panel borders with each generation. This year, the bezel is slimmer than ever, coming in at just 3.2 millimeters. The frame is made from a single piece of aerospace-grade aluminum alloy, and it's finished with an anodized ceramic coating. That should help with durability, especially after some reports of shipping damage on last year's QM851G. Hopefully, this new design clears that up. You've got a brushed gunmetal border along the tops and sides with a horizontal strip across the bottom for the TCL logo. Just underneath that, you'll find the infrared sensors, far-field mics, status LEDs, and a power button that's tucked just under the front edge. The screen itself has a slightly glossy finish, but there's an anti-reflective coating that helps cut down on glare and does a good job, I might add. And in case you're looking for that premium QD mini LED badge, TCL moved that to the back this year in the top right corner. The TV comes with a 2-part wedge-shaped stand that's easy to set up and holds the panel securely. The 85-inch and 98-inch versions switch to a wider feet-based stand to support the extra weight. The stand height can be adjusted to make room for a soundbar. In the lower position, the stand gives you about 2.3 inches of clearance. And in the raised setting, it's closer to 3.6 inches, which should be enough for most soundbars. The panel itself is fairly thick at 2.3 inches, but it has a clean, minimalist look from the front. Around the back, there are 4 HDMI ports. HDMI 1 and 2 support 4K at 144 Hz and 1080p at up to 288 Hz on the 65-inch and larger sizes. HDMI 3 and 4 support 4K at 60 Hz. HDMI 4 also includes eARC, so you can connect your soundbar or AVR and still leave those high bandwidth ports free for gaming. For HDR, the QM8K checks all the boxes: Dolby Vision, HDR10, HDR10+, HLG, and IMAX Enhanced are all supported. Wireless connectivity includes Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.3. You'll also find a USB 3.0 port, a USB 2.0 port, Ethernet optical audio out, and a next-gen built-in ATSC 3.0 tuner. And one of the bigger changes from last year, TCL has moved away from the Onkyo branded audio system. The QM8K is now using a setup designed in collaboration with Bang Olufsen. Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, and DTS Virtual X are all supported, and I'll get into how it actually sounds later in the review. Now let's talk about features, because TCL didn't just copy and paste last year's spec sheet. Like the other models in the Precise Dimming series, the QM8K uses a QD mini LED backlight system paired with a WHVA panel. TCL has also made some adjustments to its quantum dot layer this year, with slightly better DCI P3 coverage and improved control over local dimming. But the bigger story this time around is TCL's new super high energy LED chip. The company claims it improves brightness and efficiency compared to the previous generation. Along with that, there's a new condensed micro lens that helps spread light more evenly, while micro OD tech reduces the gap between the backlight and diffuser, which helps minimize blooming and improve contrast. All of that gets rolled into what TCL now calls its Halo control system. It's basically their way of saying better light source, better lens, smarter processing. And the goal? Improved grayscale, better color accuracy, and less haloing around bright objects. And like the QM6K and QM7K, the QM8K includes TCL's dynamic light algorithm, which converts SDR content into an HDR-like image. I really liked how this worked on other models, so I was glad to see it featured here as well. TCL gave the remote a redesign this year, and if you've used the one that ships with either the QM6K or the QM7K, this one feels pretty familiar. The shape is now more squared off compared to last year's version. It's slightly larger, but still sits comfortably in the hand. The main difference here is the finish. TCL went with a brushed silver look on the QM8K, and while it's still plastic, it has a metallic feel that looks more polished. definitely more premium than what you'd get with the lower tier models. One interesting note, unlike the QM7K remote, which had 2 rows of shortcuts, the QM8K remote only gives you 1. And yes, the remote is backlit, which I really think should be a given, but still isn't with a lot of brands. Just like last year, the QM8K runs on Google TV 12, and the overall experience is largely familiar, but with a few welcome updates. The home screen is still centered around the top picks for you section, which pulls in recommendations based on your watch history and subscriptions. You've got quick access to services like Prime Video, Apple TV, Hulu, and Netflix, and Google does a decent job of aggregating content from across your apps, so you're not constantly bouncing between platforms. One new addition this year is the quick settings menu that lets you access different settings without going all the way into the main menus. There's also support for Alexa and Apple HomeKit, so you can integrate it into your smart home setup. Built-in Chromecast and AirPlay 2 are both here as well, making it easy to cast or mirror content from your phone, tablet, or laptop. Alright, let's dig into performance, and there's a lot to cover. Right out of the box, the QM8K is a big step forward from last year's QM851G. That model had a noticeable red push, especially in skin tones, and it turns out I wasn't the only one who saw it. Plenty of reviewers picked up on the same thing. TCL seems to have addressed that with this new model. You get 6 picture modes in both SDR and HDR. Movie, filmmaker mode, intelligent, vivid, sports, and standard. Filmmaker mode is new this year, and it's easily the most accurate picture preset without any calibration. In that mode, most of the color errors were already under the visible threshold. Now I did find that manually setting the black level to 48 brought up the perceived contrast without crushing shadow detail. The gamma is set to 2.2 by default, which is fine for brighter rooms, but if you're watching in a dim or light controlled space, I recommend switching this to 2.4. You'll get deeper blacks and more depth in the image overall. For Dolby Vision, there are 3 modes available: light, dark, and IQ. I found the light setting to be the best overall. TCL also includes a feature called Precision Detail, which works only with Dolby Vision content. It's similar to Sony's reality creation in the sense that it adds subtle texture and edge enhancement. I actually like the effect. It added clarity in the right places without overdoing it, though your mileage may vary depending on the content. The first thing you notice when powering on the QM8K is just how bright it can get. After letting a full black screen run for a few minutes, which TCL engineers recommended, I measured 4,519 nits on a 5% window. I took these measurements in Vivid mode, which is the brightest preset available. In Filmmaker mode, which is much more balanced, I measured 2,752 nits in HDR on a 10% window. That is still really bright for viewing, and more than enough to give HDR content the impact it needs. This level of brightness translates well into actual content. In real-world conditions, the QM8K gets bright enough to give HDR scenes the punch they need. When it comes to HDR tone mapping, the QM8K tracks EOTF well. Grayscale performance is even, and color accuracy is solid. Midtones are slightly bright, but it is still a big improvement over the out-of-the-box performance I saw from the QM851G last year. When it comes to color reproduction, the QM8K delivers good results in both HDR and SDR content. I measured 93.6% of the DCI P3 color gamut and 76.3% of Rec 2020. That's solid for a QD Mini LED and contributes to a saturated but accurate color presentation, especially in HDR. Black levels are also impressive. No matter how hard I tried to find blooming, it was kept in check. I measured native contrast at 7,415 to 1, which is a good result for a mini LED panel using a WHVA type display. When sitting directly in front of the screen, haloing was nearly impossible to spot. I was already impressed with the QM6K and the QM7K that I tested previously, and the QM8K holds up just as well, if not better. Color and brightness only start to shift noticeably past the 35-degree off-axis mark, which is still pretty good for this type of panel. One area that caught me off guard was upscaling. I wasn't expecting much improvement over last year, but I did notice some gains. This is subjective since I don't have the QM851G here for a direct comparison, but upscaling looks better overall. Even though the QM8K uses the same AIPQ Pro processor as the QM851G, it seems TCL made some changes. Even 720p broadcasts look good, especially for lower resolution content. I'd recommend keeping the sharpness setting no higher than 17. Anything above that, I started seeing some minor ringing around edges. Motion handling on the QM8K is also solid. The blur and jitter reduction settings help smooth out lower frame rate content, particularly when watching compressed streams or older content. Pushing these settings too high will bring in the soap opera effect. I found that keeping both settings around 3 gave a good balance. You can raise them to 6 or 7 for smoother motion, but it starts to introduce a little too much SOE for my liking. I did see some slight stuttering during fast camera pans while watching the NBA Finals, but nothing that stood out as overly distracting. Now let's talk gaming. The QM8K has a native 144Hz panel and support for VRR, ALLM, and AMD FreeSync Premium Pro. Input lag came in at 12.6 milliseconds at 4K 60Hz. Not the lowest number I've tested recently, but still low enough that it won't pull you out of the experience. Once you kick game mode on, everything just feels smooth. Audio on the QM8K is actually better than I expected. I found myself using the film preset for most of my testing, as it offered a good balance. Bass had decent weight, the mids sounded clean, and the highs were detailed enough to keep dialogue and effects clear without harshness. There's also a setting that lets you create custom audio profiles by adjusting sound along 2 axes, ranging from warm to clear and from relaxed to energetic. It's a nice touch that you normally don't find in built-in TV speakers. The audio is solid for a built-in system, but a dedicated setup like a soundbar or separate speakers will still deliver a better overall experience. So what are my final thoughts? TCL is clearly still focused on pushing performance further without pushing prices into flagship territory, and the QM8K is another step in that direction. It brings great HDR performance, deep black levels, along with improved local dimming compared to last year's model. I said this about last year's QM8 series, but it's even more true now. This is the best TCL TV I've tested to date. And if you've been holding out for something big, literally or figuratively, without spending flagship money, this one should be on your radar. For all of that, the TCL QM8K earns an AVSForum top choice for 2025. Alright, that's it for this review. If you've got questions about the QM8K or want to know how it compares to something else you're considering, drop a comment down below. I'll do my best to try to get back to you. And if you found this review helpful, feel free to like, subscribe, and stick around for more reviews coming soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.